Here's what's about to happen. I'm gonna list 13 motorcycle rules, and with each one, you're gonna think, yep, I do that, followed immediately by, but it's not that bad. That's exactly the point, man. We all break the same rules, but we rationalize them differently. Whether it's, skipping gear when it's hot outside or ignoring that weird noise your bike's been making, we all have our excuses. This countdown is going to expose every single excuse, and trust me, you're gonna feel called out by, at least half of these. Alright, let's start with the shortcuts we take before we even leave the garage. So when nobody's watching, which piece of safety gear disappears first from your routine? Don't lie. We all know the answer changes based on the situation. You know what I'm talking about. We calculate risk differently, when we think we can get away with it, and somehow our gear requirements magically adjust to match our convenience level. Here's what drives me crazy about motorcycle forums. Everyone's posting pictures of their full gear setups, talking about AtGat like they're safety evangelists, but I guarantee half these same people have stories they'll never share online. The contradiction between what we preach and what we actually do is massive, and today we're calling it out. Let's start with rule number 13, the classic, it's just around the corner, no helmet ride. You need to move your bike 50 feet in the driveway to get to the car behind it. Suddenly, that helmet sitting right there on the seat becomes this massive inconvenience. The bike's not even leaving your property technically, so does it really count as riding? Your brain does this weird math where, distance equals risk, and 50 feet apparently equals zero risk. I've done this exact thing probably 100 times, and every single time I tell myself it doesn't count because I'm not going on the street. But here's the thing, your skull doesn't care if you're on private property when you hit the pavement. Rule 12 hits different because it's about comfort versus safety, and we all know comfort wins more often than we admit. The summer gear shuffle is real, and it happens to everyone. When it's 60 degrees outside, you're wearing your full leather jacket like you're about to hit the track. But the moment that thermometer hits 85, suddenly you discover that a t-shirt and shorts, they provide adequate protection. Dude, the worst part is we justify this by telling ourselves we're experienced enough to handle the increased risk, like somehow being a better rider makes your skin more resistant to asphalt. Your riding skills don't change the physics of road rash, but we convince ourselves they do. Rule 11 is pure time management versus proper bike care, and time management always wins when you're running late. That careful 3-minute warm-up routine you do every morning, it gets compressed into a 30-second rev fest when you realize you should have left 10 minutes ago. Your bike needs time to get the oil circulating properly, but there's this voice in your head saying, just this once won't hurt anything. Every rider has done the quick rev and go at least once, and we all know it's not great for the engine. But somehow, being late makes it acceptable. The bike will forgive us this one time, right? Rule 10 is about convincing ourselves that visual inspection equals actual maintenance. You walk up to your bike, spin the front wheel, and if it looks round and inflated, you call it good. Tire pressure? What tire pressure? If the tire's not obviously flat, then it's probably fine. We tell ourselves we can see if something's wrong, and honestly, most of the time, alright, yeah, we probably can spot major issues, but there's a difference between a visual check and actually getting out the pressure gauge. The visual tire check is just another way we cut corners while telling ourselves we're being responsible. The tire looks fine, therefore, it is fine, and that's good enough for today's ride. We justify every single shortcut with logic that sounds reasonable until you say it out loud to another rider. Thing is, these gear and prep shortcuts, they're just the beginning, tip of the iceberg. We haven't even talked about what happens once we actually hit the road, and trust me, that's where our real rule breaking begins. At least with preparation shortcuts, we're only risking our own bikes and bodies. But once we're out there riding, the rules we break start affecting everyone around us. Your riding behavior, look, it changes completely when nobody's watching, and we all know it. There's this uncomfortable truth about how different we act when we're solo versus when we're in a group ride where everyone can see what we're doing. Think about your last solo ride for just a second. Really think about it. What rules did you bend that you'd never break if there were other riders around? Group rides turn everyone into model citizens, perfect following distance, proper signals, and complete stops at every sign. But get us alone on the road, and suddenly we become creative interpreters of traffic laws. The psychology is simple. When other riders are watching, we want to look responsible and skilled. When we ride alone, we make decisions based on what feels practical rather than what looks proper. Rule 9 is something literally every rider has done, and if you say you haven't, you're lying. The rolling stop at empty intersections makes perfect sense when you can see for miles in every direction. You approach a four-way stop in the middle of nowhere. You got visibility that stretches to the horizon. There's not a car, truck, or bicycle anywhere. Your brain immediately starts calculating whether coming to a complete stop serves any actual safety purpose. The bike slows down. You look both ways twice, and you roll through it maybe 5 miles per hour. Technically illegal, but practically safe. We tell ourselves that traffic laws exist to manage traffic, and when there's no traffic, hey, the law becomes more like a suggestion. You know, the worst part is this logic actually makes sense until a cop appears out of nowhere and reminds you that laws don't have visibility requirements. Alright, Rule 8 drives me crazy because we all do it, but we act like we don't. Creative speed limit interpretation is standard operating procedure for motorcycle riders. That sign says 55, but everyone knows it really means 65, especially on those long, straight highways where you can see forever. We justify this by pointing out that cars are doing the same speed, so we're just flowing with traffic. The speed limit feels arbitrary when you're on a machine that can accelerate past most cars without breaking a sweat. Your bike is capable of going twice the posted limit, so riding 10 over feels conservative and responsible. We convince ourselves that going with the flow of traffic is actually safer than following the posted speed limit because nobody else follows it either. The math works in our heads until we pass that state trooper who apparently didn't get the memo about acceptable speed ranges. Rule 7 gets into more questionable territory, but every rider has experimented with lane position flexibility. Sometimes you need to ride between lanes to get a better view ahead or to position yourself for an upcoming turn. Now, lane splitting is legal in some places, and it's illegal in others, but that doesn't stop riders from creative positioning when they think it serves a purpose. You're not really lane splitting, you're just adjusting your position within your lane to see around that truck. The fact that your adjustment puts you 6 inches into the neighboring lane, it's just a technical detail. We tell ourselves it's defensive riding, because better visibility means better safety, even if the method of achieving that visibility bends the rules slightly. The psychology behind these behaviors is fascinating because they all sound terrible when you say them out loud, but feel completely reasonable in the moment. Rolling through stop signs, ignoring speed limits, and creative lane usage become justifiable when we frame them as experienced rider judgment calls. We trust our skills and our well-honed situational awareness more than we trust blanket traffic laws that were written for the lowest common denominator of road users. Problem is, this logic only works when everything goes according to plan, and we all know how often that happens. Traffic violations are just the beginning, though. Our rule breaking gets even more creative when it comes to maintaining our bikes, and that's where things get really interesting, because now we're not just bending rules, we're ignoring problems that could leave us stranded. All right, level with me and level with yourself. What weird noise or maintenance issue are you currently ignoring on your bike right now? Don't pretend you don't know what I'm talking about. There's something making a sound that wasn't there last month, or there's a fluid level that's been sitting at the same spot way too long. Every single rider has that one thing they're monitoring instead of fixing, and we all tell ourselves we're being responsible by keeping an eye on it. This is the universal rider experience that nobody talks about in the forums. You hear something that probably needs attention, but instead of dealing with it, like immediately, you choose to monitor the situation. We become experts at distinguishing between different types of mechanical sounds and ranking them by urgency. Oh, that slight grinding noise, that gets filed under probably fine for another few hundred miles. While, you're getting an occasional metallic ping, alright, that one gets classified as worth watching, but not worth fixing yet. The suspense builds over time because deep down, we all know these problems don't fix themselves. They get worse and more expensive, and eventually, they'll strand us somewhere inconvenient. But somehow we convince ourselves that if we monitor the problem closely enough, we'll catch it before it becomes catastrophic. The question is, how long will we let these issues persist before we finally admit they need professional attention? Rule 6 hits every chain drive motorcycle owner at some point. The "I'll check that next week" chain maintenance philosophy. It's practically universal. Your chain starts making noise during acceleration, and it needs adjustment or lubrication, but it's not that bad yet, and you've got places to be. You tell yourself you'll deal with it next weekend. I'll have more time then. I'll get it done. Next weekend comes and the noise is still there. But it hasn't gotten worse. So clearly you can push it another week. This cycle continues until the chain is so stretched and dry that it sounds like a freight train. But by then you've become so accustomed to the noise that it feels normal. Rule 5 is pure selective hearing combined with mechanical denial. The mysterious noise investigation starts when you hear something new and concerning. You spend exactly 30 seconds trying to identify the source, and when you can't pinpoint it immediately, you decide it's probably not important enough to worry about. If you can't identify it right away, then clearly it's not an obvious problem, which means it can wait. We become masters at convincing ourselves that unidentifiable noises are just like part of the bike's personality or something like that, rather than potential mechanical failures demanding attention, which is what they are. Rule 4 shows just how optimistic we can be about fluid levels when we don't want to deal with maintenance. Your brake fluid reservoir is sitting down at the minimum line, but you decide half full is basically full. You've got at least another 1,000 miles before you need to think about it. And besides, brake fluid doesn't just disappear overnight. The oil level is somewhere between the minimum and maximum marks, so that's close enough to full for practical purposes. We treat fluid levels like gas gauges, where anything above empty means you're fine to keep riding. Here's what's fascinating about maintenance procrastination. Mechanical issues that would completely terrify us on someone else's bike become acceptable risks on our own machines. You'd never ride a borrowed bike that made weird noises or had questionable fluid levels, but somehow your own bike gets different standards. We know every sound our bike makes, and we convince ourselves that familiarity equals safety. The rattling noise that would make you refuse to ride a friend's motorcycle becomes just another quirk of your daily ride. We develop selective hearing when it comes to unusual sounds and vibrations. That new vibration at highway speeds gets mentally filed under probably just needs new tires, while the occasional grinding sound during braking gets classified as normal wear and tear. Our brains filter out mechanical problems the same way they filter out background noise, because acknowledging every potential issue, it would be overwhelming. The truth about maintenance procrastination is that it's really about not wanting to face potentially expensive repairs. Every strange noise represents a possible trip to the mechanic and, a bill that might be larger than we want to handle right now. So we monitor instead of fix, and we hope that our mechanical problems will remain manageable until we're ready to deal with them financially and logistically. These maintenance rules are just the warm-up, though. The final 3 rules are the ones that hit closest to home because they're about how we interact with other people on and off our bikes. Think about your most recent interaction with other riders or drivers. How did you handle signaling? Where did you park? What did you do when you started your bike this morning? These final 3 rules are different because they're not just about our own safety or convenience. They're about the social contract we have with everyone around us, both on the road and in our communities. These are the social contract violations that every rider commits, but hopes others don't notice. We break these rules, fully knowing they affect other people, but we do it anyway because we think nobody will call us out. The difference between these and the previous rules is that mechanical shortcuts and road behavior mostly impact us. These social riding sins make us inconsiderate neighbors and unpredictable road users, even when we don't mean to be. What makes these final rules so universal is that even the most conscientious riders who follow every safety protocol and maintain their bikes perfectly still break these social rules regularly. You know which rule I'm talking about. The one that's gonna make you feel personally attacked because you probably did it within the last week. Rule 3 is the phantom turn signal, and every rider has experienced this exact scenario. You're approaching a turn, you reach for the signal switch, but your hand doesn't quite make it there in time. By the time you remember to signal, you're already halfway through the turn, and now signaling feels pointless because everyone can already see what you're doing. So you complete the turn without signaling, tell yourself it doesn't matter because your intentions were obvious anyway. Worst part is this happens more often when we're riding familiar routes because we're on autopilot and forget that other road users can't read our minds. We meant to signal, but meaning doesn't count in traffic. Rule 2 gets creative with parking regulations and property boundaries. Parking creativity, it tends to strike when you find a spot that technically fits your bike, even though it's not exactly a designated parking space. If it fits and you're not blocking anyone important, then it's basically a legal parking spot, right? That narrow space between 2 cars that's too small for another car, but perfect for a motorcycle becomes fair game. The sidewalk area next to the bike rack isn't really sidewalk if you're not blocking pedestrian traffic. We convince ourselves that motorcycle parking operates under different rules because we take up less space, I know, and we cause less inconvenience than cars. These social rules feel less important when we're in a hurry or when nobody seems to be watching. Signaling becomes optional when we think other drivers can predict our movements. Parking restrictions become suggestions when we need to get somewhere quickly and there's, technically, room for our bike. We rationalize these violations by telling ourselves that the spirit of the rule is more important than the letter of the law. Number 1 rule that everyone breaks is going to hit you right in the chest because you've definitely done this and you know exactly why you did it, even though you feel guilty about it. Rule 1 is the neighbor-friendly cold start. And this one hurts because it shows our biggest contradiction as riders. You love your bike and you want to ride it, but you also want to be a considerate member of your community. The problem is motorcycles are loud, especially when they're cold, and especially early in the morning or late at night. You know that starting your bike and letting it warm up properly is going to wake up half the neighborhood. So you make a compromise that satisfies nobody. You'll rev it just enough to get moving, even though you know cold engines need time to warm up, and you know the sound is still going to wake people up anyway. This rule represents our biggest contradiction between being considerate community members and passionate riders. We want to do right by our neighbors, but we also want to ride our bikes when we need to ride them. The guilt hits hardest because these are the people closest to us. These are our neighbors who have to live next to us every day, not anonymous drivers on the highway who we'll never see again. The neighbor-friendly cold start is the rule that exposes how we prioritize our writing passion over social consideration, even when we genuinely, really care about the people we're affecting. We keep doing it because we love writing more than we hate feeling guilty about waking people up. Breaking these rules doesn't make us bad writers. It proves we're human beings who adapt to real-world situations. We calculate risk constantly, and sometimes our calculations just don't happen to match official recommendations. That's normal, and honestly, it's part of what makes writing interesting. Now, here's your homework. Go to the comments right now and confess which rule hit you hardest. Tag that writing buddy who you know is guilty of at least half these behaviors. Let's see how honest this community can get about our rule-breaking habits. Hey, awareness is the first step toward making better choices while keeping our writing passion alive.